What is going on, YouTube? Here we go. We have an in-depth guide for the potentially new Tier 1 deck. That's kind of the question on everyone's mind. Definitely a strong meta contender, and definitely a deck that you will see in ranked, in tournaments, in KCGT. You are going to see this deck. The only question is it the best deck or is it not the best deck? Regardless of what the question may be at the time of making this video, I have a guide here to show you guys how you can get started in playing against this deck, and maybe potentially even how to counter this deck if you don't want to necessarily play this deck. Just a little bit of everything for everyone. Before we get started, a few housekeeping things to keep in mind when it comes to this deck. Number one, this guide is going to be geared more towards ranked play and ladder solo play and KCGT play. While I will be bringing up tournament data and some tournament text later in the video, and that will be a small portion of it, a majority of players playing Yu-Gi-Oh! Duel Links play pretty much solely the ladders, so this guide will kind of focus more around that. I won't totally ignore tournament scene. I will include a couple of cards, but for the most part, we're going to be sticking to just playing this deck, getting King of Games, getting KC max level, etc., etc., etc. So if you're that type of player, which it's going to be most of our viewers are going to end up being that type of player, then this is the perfect video for you. Second thing to bring up about this deck, it is a free-to-play deck, but it is a deck that is, again, carried by its skill. We're seeing a lot of decks be like that, so you do have to make sure you get this skill. Very simple to do so. You just have to summon Red Dragon Archfiend 30 times with your boy Jack, and you're able to do that. You do have to synchro summon it. You can't special summon it and get multiple times per. So just make an auto duel deck. That's what I did. I just made an auto duel deck that only had Red Dragon Archfiends in it in order to unlock the skill. And then third, lastly, not as important, this isn't actually a Red Dragon Archfiend deck. It's more of a Red Resonator deck. I've started referring to it as the Red Resonator deck. Most common builds that you see both on ladder and in tournament play don't even play the actual Red Dragon Archfiend boss monster. The only one you'll really ever see is this guy right here, Hot Red Dragon Archfiend Bane. So that's pretty much you know, the only one that you realistically see these days, and I do recommend only playing him. And we'll get into that, why we do all that later down in the video as well. So yeah, before we get started, just want to let you guys know I'll try and break up the video down at the bottom into different little parts, so you can click to individual parts if you already know certain parts of the video or if certain parts don't apply to you. And, you know, very quickly before we continue on to the video, just want to bring up, consider subscribing to the YouTube, especially for more content like this. I would love to do more YouTube content like this, but you guys got to show me that you like this type of content and show that support. That makes me want to make more content like this. So anyway, without further ado, what is the RDA deck? So it's a synchro spam deck that makes you gain a ton of life points, but the main thing about it is the core is so small, especially thanks to the skill, that you're able to play pretty much any back row. You have so much life points that you're able to play some of the more broken counter traps in the game, and it's very easily able to spam out its entire extra deck in just a few turns, where most decks, you know, can only go once or twice into the extra deck. So it's very powerful against OTK strategies. It can OTK itself. It has amazing search potential and consistency. Very, very rarely will you brick with this deck. So if you're a type of player that doesn't like, you know, inconsistent decks, this is definitely the deck for you. And then one of its more key defining features is its normal summon is very much often left up to whatever you want to do with your normal summon, because it special summons a lot with its individual monsters, and it pretty much leaves your normal summon open to whatever you want to normal summon, which comes into huge play later down the road. We'll go over that in just a wee bit. Now, this is what you see on your screen right now is the core of the deck. This is pretty much cards that are, in my opinion, required in order to play the deck. So starting things off, let's actually read the skill first, because again, like I said earlier, the skill by far is the most important thing about this whole archetype, right? So Demon's Resonance, Can be used by revealing one Resonator monster in your hand. Return one card from your hand, so it does not have to be that Resonator monster you revealed. It can be any card in your hand. So if I have a Resonator and a Cosmic Cyclone, I show you the Resonator, I take the Cosmic back into the deck. And then add one level 4 or lower Fiend-type monster to your hand from your deck. You cannot activate the effect of the added card or cards with the same name during this turn. This skill will only activate if you begin the duel with a deck that has 10 or more Resonator cards or Fiend-type monsters, and an extra deck that has only Dragon-type Synchro monsters. This skill can only be used once per turn and twice per duel. So amazing consistency skill here. Any Resonator monster, so if you look at the core, you're running 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 Resonator monsters and 1, 2, 3 searches for those Resonator monsters. So for a total of 8, you know, amazing, as long as your opening hand has 8 of these cards, one of 8 of these cards, your skill is live and immediately lets you search the remainder of your deck, essentially minus your text. So amazing skill, and it lets you search any level 4 or lower Fiend monster, and there are so many good Fiend monsters that we'll get into as the video goes on. In terms of core cards, though, Wandering King Wildwind. Now this card allows himself to special summon onto the board if you have a Fiend type tuner with 1500 or less attack points, so pretty much all your Resonators. If any of these boys are on the board, you can summon this guy for free. It is not an activated effect, so if you add this card with Demon's Residence, you can still special summon him. That is super huge because that's pretty much, if it turns this like 2-card combo into always having a card. And this is how you always have a card, because if this guy is in your graveyard, which there's numerous ways to get him to the graveyard, synchro summoning is going to be the common way, then you can, except the turn that it was sent there, you can banish him and you can add a Fiend type tuner, so you can add any of your Resonators instead. So at the beginning of a turn, your skill is live. If this guy's in your graveyard, you banish him, add the card, you're going to draw naturally. You're able to then use your ability, show the card that you just added with the Wild Wind, and then add anything, any Fiend back to your hand. So the consistency is insane when it comes to Wild Wind plus a Resonator. So, oh my god, you know? So special summon, love it, awesome. Crimson Resonator. This is the Resonator. I think this was a new Resonator that came out in like 2020, even like in the TCG. So he has been huge for the deck and one of the new cards that they got. So basically, if you control no monsters, you can special summon this card from your hand. And if you control a Dark Dragon type Synchro monster, you can special summon, it says up to 2 Resonators from your hand or deck, but you're only going to have one. If you have a Dragon Synchro and then this guy, you only have room for 1. So you bring out, you try to bring out, you know, basically your red Resonator with this. Now, be mindful that this does lock you into Dark Dragon-type Synchro monsters, and while the extra deck I'm going to show you only runs Dark Synchro types, it's not a huge deal. If you do plan on teching in, because remember, the skill lets you use Dragon Synchro monsters, not necessarily Dark, this is what it's going to lock you in. The Wild Wind allows you to special summon Synchro monsters, so you're good to go with Wild Wind, but this will actually lock you in if you decide to run anything else spicy in the deck. I don't personally recommend it, but you can if you want. So amazing, again, another special summon. Red Resonator, when this guy is normal summon, you can special summon a level 4 monster from your hand, level 4 or lower, so you can summon another tuner with this if you wanted to. This effect does come in handy from time to time, but most of the time when you are looking at this card, you are going to be bringing out with the Crimson Resonator. You're going to have a Dark Synchro, you're going to have a Crimson Resonator, and then that Crimson Resonator is going to special summon the Red Resonator. Because when Red Resonator special summons, you can target any monster in the field, and you gain that much life points. It can be an opponent's monster, it can be your own monster, does not matter. This is how this deck is able to obtain TCG levels of life points. Like, we're talking 8,000 plus in a couple turns, you know what I mean? It is insane, basically through the Red Resonator. And then, of course, the Resonator Call. This is also a brand new card that came out. Resonator Call allows you to add any Resonator monster to your hand, which, again, you can use this, add a Resonator, Demon's Residence, look for a Wild Wind, and there you go. You have full combo. Super, super, super consistent. These two monsters special summon the Crimson and the Wild Wind. Red Resonator would normal summon, but you rarely normal summon. So from the core that I've shown you, nothing needs to be normal summoned. That's how insane that is. Going into the extra deck, the most important card in the extra deck is your Red Rising Dragon. When this card is synchro summon, you can go ahead and bring back one of your Resonators. So the idea is if you have Crimson, special summon Wild Wind, you go into the Red Rising, bring back Crimson. Now, because Red Rising is a Dark Synchro monster, or Dark Synchro Dragon monster, you can go ahead and special summon the Red Resonator for free with your Crimson Resonator from your deck. Amazing. So there you go. Plus 2,100 life points from those two card combos. That two card combo is continuously playing. And now you have two tuners and a Red Rising Dragon. He also does have an effect where if he was sent to the graveyard, you can banish this card, target level 1 Resonators from your graveyard, special summon them. We don't play level 1s in the core deck, but just mentioning it, that it's there. Following up the chain ladders, that's a level 6. Sorry, still in the Exceed mood. Rest in peace, Exceeds. We have our level 8s, Dark End Dragon. Dark End Dragon, it works like Dark Lord Desire. If you remember that card, you make this card lose 500 attack and defense, and if it successfully does that, you can target a monster your opponent controls, and you send it to the graveyard. Not destroy. Does not destroy. It sends it to the graveyard. So things like Winda effect will not have activate because it doesn't destroy them. It just sends them there. So very, very powerful effect, and it still stays at 2,100 attack points after using it, which is very critical to trying to lethal your opponents, because if you're synchro climbing, you're going to have this Dark End Dragon plus another tuner, so you can immediately go into your rank 10 or your level 10 if you wanted to do that. The other one that we use at the level 8 era is the Infernity Doom Dragon. Now this one requires a Dark Tuner, so you can't make it with Red Resonator, you have to make it with the Crimson Resonator. But when he's on the board, if you have no cards in your hand, instead of attacking that turn with this card, you can choose a monster your opponent controls, you can pop it, and then half of its attack is burn damage on your opponent. Now this could be really good if you're trying to push for lethal, because you can go into this and then rank up into the level 10 instead of the Dark End Dragon to get a little bit more damage if you're unable to normal summon another monster to push for that lethal with the Dark End Dragon. You can push with lethal for the Infernity Doom Dragon instead. Speaking of level 10, finally we have a Red Dragon Archfiend come into the whole mix. Hot Red Dragon Archfiend Bane. Yes, sir. This is the only Red Dragon Archfiend that I recommend playing out of all of them. His effect is pretty irrelevant in this build that I'm going to show you. He mostly becomes a 3,500 beater, but his effects, if you wanted to use them, or whenever he inflicts damage, you can bring a tuner from the graveyard and a tuner from the deck, special summon both in defense, and then you can tribute another monster on the board, including himself, to summon a properly synchro summoned Red Dragon Archfiend onto the board from your graveyard. That's pretty much all he'd be doing. So in this build, we're pretty much using him because he's 3,500, and we can go from our Infernity Doom Dragon, who can no longer attack. You can bring out the big boy Archfiend Bane and swing for game at that point. So that is the core of the deck. Let me show you a sample deck list so you can kind of see how cheap this game is to play. This one is more focused around, being super aggressive with the back row negation. You can see the cosmics and everything. Doom Caliber Knight is my fiend monster of choice, not because he's just prismatic, because he has an amazing effect. He can't be special summoned, but during either player's turn, if a monster effect is activated, tribute this face-up card as cost, negate the activation, and if you do, destroy that monster. So, amazing card. It is a mandatory effect, so you can, accidentally nuke your own card effects. Be careful not to do that. It can be your Wild Wind, it can be a hand trap, it doesn't matter. He will nuke it, so be careful not to nuke your own stuff. But you can pretty much search for this guy. The first turn you search him, his effect will not go through. Keep that in mind because it is an activated effect. But on your opponent's turn, like if you go first, you bring this guy out, you're able to go ahead and negate a monster, their first monster effect. And for some decks, that's whatever, because it is mandatory. You don't get to select when to activate Doom Caliber. It just happens on the first monster effect. There are some decks that are able to kind of, push past that and be like, whatever, I don't really care about that. But a lot of decks need all of the monster effects they have, like Harpies, for example. Even if they have Swallow's Nest, they're still going to get their initial, whatever that first monster effect, negated, which can cost them some material. So a lot of people's personal choice, Doom Caliber Knight, my personal choice, really going for it from there. You guys know what Cosmic Cyclone and True Nade do. You can use MST if you have MST instead. Doesn't really matter in ranked. If I was going to play this at a more competitive level, I would definitely go MST right now to play around TTH. And then Solemn Scolding is my trap of choice. Now, Solemn Scolding says if it's the only set card in your spell trap zone, has to be the only set one. When a monster would be summoned, so an inherent summon, you can go check out our video if you don't know what an inherent summon is, or a spell, trap, or monster effect is activated, you pay 3,000 life points, negate the summoner activation, and if you do, destroy that card. Negates the actual activation, not the effect. So before that monster even touches the floor, that field spell touches the field spell zone, the whatever, before it even goes off, it's just a dead card with Solemn Scolding. It's a counter trap. Only counter traps can stop other counter traps in this game. So very powerful effect. The 3,000 life point cost is irrelevant because the red resonator will constantly be giving you life points every single time you summon it. So it almost feels like this is a free card to play, and you can get it, with tickets. So amazing card that goes into this deck. So let's talk about some other options you could play, because again, that's just a sample deck list. You don't have to play it that way. Here are some other cards. Stay with me. There's some wild stuff that happens in here. So let's first off talk about Red Dragon Archfiend. Why don't I like playing Red Dragon Archfiend? Why do a lot of the tournament competitive players not play Red Dragon Archfiend? Because you need Red Dragon Archfiend to play Red Nova Dragon, right? Why not? So a couple of reasons. Number one, this is a level 8, so it would replace probably your Dark End Dragon, because you still want to play one Dark End and one Infernity Doom Dragon. The problem is you can't summon this turn 1, because if you don't attack with your monsters, they get blown up by Red Dragon Archfiend's effects, so, he promotes a very aggressive playstyle, if you will. And it's usually just not worth it. And the only time he's really super useful is when you try to OTK with Red Dragon Archfiend Bane by tributing another monster, then OTKing with the Red Dragon Archfiend. And pretty much in any situation that you would have lethal with that, you'd probably have lethal by going into the Infernity Doom Dragon and getting lethal that way. There just isn't really any real reason to play this card when it has such a downside of blowing up your own board, when you could just play another 3k monster that can, essentially do everything that this card can do, minus like popping defense mode monsters when it swings. So there isn't too much reason to play this card. The Red Nova Dragon, now this card cannot be destroyed by card effects. So you might be thinking, this should be great in a Fire King matchup. This should be great in a Thunder Dragon matchup. Why aren't we playing this card? Two main reasons. It requires 2 tuners and Red Dragon Archfiend. So we already talked about how we don't want to play Red Dragon Archfiend. And on top of that, it requires 2 tuners. So it's a huge cost to play this card. But when you finally bring it out, the only protection it has is not to be destroyed by card effects. So it can still be bounced by Harpy Slash. It can still be Karma Cut, and it could still be Book of Moon, M7, Book of Moon into Fire King pops, into Thunder Dragon pops. We've seen people use Force Focus on this, followed up by a Levianeer. It just leaves you too open, and it would have worked back in the day before we had Book of Moon, before we had, ways to disrupt, because we can still target this card. It's just not as good of an effect. If it could be destroyed, but it could not be targeted, that's a different story. But just being unable to be destroyed is just not enough of a good effect to carry, like, to take an extra deck spot for you. So we pretty much disregard these 2 cards. I would only recommend playing these 2 cards if the meta shifts, or if you really want to roleplay, you know, as Jack Atlas, pretty much. So let's talk about the crazy cards that you see up here. Why is Obelisk up here? Caius, all these cards. All of these are normal summons. So, like I said before, you can make a whole combo where you don't normal summon, and then you could tribute summon. You could tribute summon for Caius, which lets you banish a monster on the banish a card on the board. That's pretty cool. You could go ahead and make Obelisk the Tormentor. He cannot be targeted. He can be destroyed by card effects, but he cannot be targeted, so he's the exact opposite of a red Nova Dragon. Or you could play something like a Lava Golem. He uses up your normal summon to clear 2 monsters on your opponent's board. So that's pretty cool. That just kind of shows you how open your normal summon is. You can't search for any of these, but if you top deck them, you basically can just play them at any time. So if you don't want to go into your synchro decks, or you want an additional boss monster, you can absolutely play those cards if you just want to. I personally don't, but you can. There are other notable fiend monsters. For example, Goblin of Greed. As long as this card remains face up on your side of the field, neither player can activate an effect by discarding from his or her hand. So lots of cards discard to activate by sending to the graveyard. You can make them all stop by just summoning this guy, and he just stops it from happening. So super cool. Not an activated effect, continuous effect. Boom, resonance, doesn't matter, right? So that's pretty cool. Some other notable cards to keep in mind is your Forbidden Chalices, Book of Moons, whatever you have. Chalice, the more free-to-play option. Book of Moon, really good. Especially in the mirror match, if they have like a Doom Caliber, you might want to bring a couple of Book of Moons. If you have them, Forbidden Chalice is also really, really good. Definitely recommend. Remember, Doom Caliber, you want to negate the actual effect, not the activation. And then, because of the meta that we're in, this deck does lose to Floodgates, like Necro Valley and stuff like that, pretty heavily. So if you don't want to run the True Nade and you want to run triple MST, triple Cosmic, TTH is another fantastic card you can take into this deck, like pretty much every deck that can run it, instead of the True Nade, if that was another option. In tournament play, there's still a bunch of other cards that you can use. For example, there's the Stygian Dirge that you guys may have seen on stream a couple times. Reduce the levels of all your opponent's monsters' controls by 1. That is a fantastic tournament side deck, especially in the mirror match. Stopping your opponent from Synchro or Exceed summoning is very, very powerful. And then pretty much if you go to the filters and you go level 4, 3, or 2, 1, it doesn't really matter. Because you can do anything level 4 or below. Hit up the Fiends, right up here somewhere. There we are. Everything that comes up, minus the extra deck monsters, all the normal monsters, I should say, can all be searchable. You just have to remember that if it has an activated effect, you can't use it the turn that you search. So cards like Skullmeister are a fantastic card to keep in your hand. Whenever your opponent activates a graveyard effect, you can send this card from your hand to the graveyard, negate the effect. Fantastic effect. You can search Sphere Karibo if you want to search Sphere Karibo, another fantastic tech for some defensive play. I personally don't like Sphere Karibo because you always have so many life points that it really doesn't matter. So, you know, I usually just skip on the Sphere Karibo, but you can definitely use it if you want to. You can have multiple Doom Calibers, Sangan, Snipe Hunter, Misjudge is in here. If you really want to get nasty with it, you can go with Misjudge. There are a bunch of Fiend cards in the game, and if this deck continues to be optimized, you know, I think this is going to be kind of the area where people are looking through all the individual cards, reading what they all do, and then applying them to the main deck, you know? Like, you could search whatever you want. So, pretty cool. Pretty cool when it comes to all of that. Now, you might be thinking, okay, if I'm playing your deck, how do I match up against certain archetypes? So, let's start off with Harpies, right? Harpy Ladies, most popular on the ladder right now. How do we deal with Harpy Ladies? Well, if you're playing this version, Solemn Scolding is going to be your best answer. right? Because Solemn Scolding is a counter trap. They can't chain things like Swallow's Nest or Forbidden Lance, so they go for that normal summon. Solemn Scolding, that is the end of their plays. They can no longer do anything. They can no longer special summon, and that pretty much is going to put the game, you know, you're going to carry the game at that point. Beyond that, if they do go first and make the Cyber Slash, you are able to, if you have back row removal, you're pretty much going to win because you don't play any spells or trap once your monster's on the board. The most you're going to be playing is Resonators, Call, True Nades, and Cosmics to set up for your board, and then you're just going to special summon, special summon, special summon. So by the time you're finished special summoning, you'll be able to deal with the Harpy Slash either through Dark End or through Infernity Doom Dragon, and then they'll be forced to use their effect. You can just follow up with a normal summon, and then probably continue your plays anyway. So very, very good matchup when it comes to Harpy Ladies. Not hard whatsoever for this deck, which is, you know, one of the primary reasons that's getting so many wins in tournaments. It just has such a good Harpy matchup. It also helps that even if the Harpy Lady sends back the extra deck monsters, it's very, very simple. This deck goes to the extra deck like in a couple turns, so sending it back actually helps them in a way, especially if it's the Red Rising Dragons, because they really need those to start off their plays. So there you go. From there. Automats. Automats is another matchup where it's like should be relatively easy. Now Automats, they kind of rely on OTKing you when you're at 4,000 life. So the moment you're above 4,000 life, they have difficulty OTKing you. They can do it with Heroic Champion Excalibur and the Gaga Samurai, but it's hard to do that and deal with a full board at the same time. They usually have to pick one or the other, especially when you have to play. They have to play through negates, such as Doom Caliber and the Solemn Scolding. So this one's kind of been pushing Automats out of the meta a little bit, just because their life point gain is just so high that they're unable to deal with the effects, and then on the follow-up turn, they just get hit with the Dark End, with the Infernity Doom, and then they get lethal because they're at 4,000 at that point. Because it's very easy to make double Dark End Dragon or an Infernity Doom into a Hot Red Dragon Archfiend Bane. Because remember, Wandering Wild Wind is not once per turn. You can if you have one in the hand plus a Crimson Resonator, you can go ahead, add another one to your hand, and you pretty much have lethal on every single board that's imaginable with double Dark End Dragon. So it's really hard for Automats right now. What else? We have on the ladder, you're still going to see a lot of Blue Eyes. Honestly, that matchup just kind of comes down to if whoever drew, like, did he draw more back row or did you draw more back row removal? If you're able to draw your back row removal, they pretty much can't do anything to you. And it's very relevant that Azure Eyes is at 1 now, because once you deal with it with your Hot Red Dragon Archfiend Bane, you can pretty much force whatever synchros they have. You're able to bring this bad boy out and swing to them at that point. Now, as far as bad matchups, you've got Fire Kings and Waters. Now, the Water deck is another small core deck that's able to run, you know, pretty much any floodgate they want. So Necro Valley, Stygian Dirge of their own, etc., etc. All these cards, they screw you, they heavily screw you, so you need Cosmic MST to get rid of it. Upside, they don't have draw power. All they do is just bring cards out of their deck with Buzzsaw and Diva. They don't actually draw that much, so it shouldn't happen too often, but you may run into it a little bit. More commonly, you're probably going to run into Fire Kings, and hand traps and battle traps like Drowning Mirror Force, Wall of D are huge issues. Because the extra deck monsters themselves, none of them are exceptionally powerful on their own. It's more of just being, you know, more powerful than the sum of their parts. They just all work together to obtain lethal. You don't have like a Cyber Slash where you're bouncing to the hand or anything spicy like that. So, you know, I've seen so many of these decks swing into Drowning and lose. I've seen so many of these decks get controlled by Sphere Karibo because they went over aggressive. They lose their board next turn to a Garunix, and they've run out of Red Rising Dragons, so they can't access the rest of their extra deck. And they have like 10,000 life points, but it doesn't matter because they can't access their extra deck anymore, and they just lose because they're out of steam at that point. So any deck that's like stally, very heavy on the stall, very heavy on the battle traps, especially if you don't open your Cosmic or MSTs, or even True Nades. Even if you open True Nade, if you don't get OTK'd, those decks can be a bit of a struggle when it comes to the Red Dragon Archfiend kind of win condition, if you will. So let's take a look at a couple of replays that I have kind of to explain the bread and butter combo as well as some other things. I've saved a couple of them. So let's go down the list. Got a couple of meta matches, couple non-meta matches, as you will see. These are all from KCGT around, I guess your rank doesn't matter, but in around the legend area. So here we go. We're going second versus Mako Youth. What is this? It's Harpy Ladies. Why? I'm not really sure, but here we are. So you can go ahead and see my opening hand does not have a Crimson Resonator. So it's going to be kind of hard. It's kind of hard to, because if I use my skill to add Crimson Resonator, I can't activate his effect to special summon. So I have to commit my my normal summon early if I don't draw one, essentially, right? So here we go. He's going first, goes into his Elegant Egotist. You can kind of see, you know, he's going to make Harpy Slash, and he ends up having 2 set cards. So now, like I said, all of my spells, they're not going to activate when I have monsters on the board. I'm going to activate them before, so it's totally on him to activate his cards, right? I do top deck the Crimson Resonator. I have 6 of them. I have 3 Crimson Resonators and 3 Resonator Calls, so it's not that crazy to think that I top deck it. 6 would be Crimson Resonators, 10 would be non-Crimson Resonators, so pretty good chances on that part. I do Cosmic, end up hitting the middle. It was the Hysteric Party. This ends up actually being the only card that he can successfully activate. So I'm just going to go for lethal at this point. I'm going to go ahead, special summon the Crimson, special summon the Wild Wind. That is your bread and butter combo. Those 2 cards, they both special summoned, have not used my normal yet. Bring out the Red Rising, bring back the Crimson. Crimson brings out the Red Resonator. Red Resonator, I can target my own dragon to gain 21. Oh, but look, he has a 2600 monster. Click it, gain 26, keep synchro summoning, go into the Dark End Dragon. This is going to be 2100 because I'm going to go ahead and send the Slash Dragon, or the Slash Cyber Harpy Lady. If he had anything to activate to bounce, this is his last chance. He has to do it now. I still haven't used my normal summon. I can still continue my plays. Boom. So here we go, we get rid of it. He's like, oh, what's the possibility that he can go for lethal? This is kind of a mistake I see people do a lot. They go for over lethal. People will continue synchro summoning. They'll bring out Arch Dragon Fiend Bane. They'll normal summon Doom Caliber. Like, they'll keep going. You should, for this deck, unless you know you're playing a deck that has multiple hand traps, and even then, you really want to save your resources because it's easy to get into that mindset of just use. I have exact lethal with Doom Caliber and Dark End Dragon. This is exact lethal. Even if I do not lethal him this turn, I have 5,600 life points, I have a Wild Wind in the grave to give me another Crimson Resonator, and I have my skill live next turn. Even if I don't kill him this turn, I have a Doom Caliber to negate, I have follow-up. I should not get greedy, I should just try to lethal. If it doesn't work out, I will get him next turn. The chances of me losing are so low at this point, right? Ends up that he has nothing that is exact lethal. We win from that point. So in this next matchup, I do believe this is another Harpy Lady, and you can kind of see the power of my trap card when I use it here. I believe this time I actually go first. So let's see what we have. You say Fudo, assuming he's using Tie That Bind in that case. We're going first. Here we go. Alright, so we go first. You can see here my opening hand is pretty darn good. I have 2 Resonator Calls. This is not a once per turn card. You can activate as many that you open. We have the Solemn Scolding, and we have a Book of Moon. Ignore the Book of Moon. I think I end up actually returning it to the deck, so it's irrelevant. I was just messing around with builds. You can just do Chalice instead. So here we go, Crimson Resonator, add it to the hand, activate again. We can go ahead, I add the Red Resonator. Really should be adding double Crimson, but whatever, it doesn't really matter. Demon's Resonance, we're going to take the Red Resonator. I did keep the Book of Moon. All right, we're chilling. Again, it could be a Chalice, it's irrelevant. Brings out the Crimson, brings out the Wander Wind. This is your bread and butter combo that is the basics for everything. You go into the Red Rising, you bring back Crimson. Crimson special summons the Red Resonator. Red Resonator gives you 21 3,100 life points. That Solemn Scolding costs 3k. You will still have 3,100 life points after resolving Scolding. That is insanity. Even if he had a Harpy's Hunting Ground, I can negate the normal summon and the Harpy's Hunting Ground will never even go off. That's how crazy it is. I do have to keep the Book of Moon in hand because remember, this has to be the only set card in the spell and trap zone. So here we go. He goes for the Channeler. I immediately scold this because he cannot activate Swallow's Nest. He cannot activate Forbidden Lance. He can't activate any of that. This is going to die, and he will have no more summons after that. Channeler goes out. He sets one card. I go in for my Darkened Dragon to make space. I top deck a Doom Caliber. Summon the Doom Caliber. Ends up being a Floodgate. This guy's screwed. There's nothing he can do at this point. I still have Book of Moon to stop his next normal summon. I go ahead, I add the Crimson Resonator, make the Bane, and then he scoops at this point. There's really nothing that he can do. So, there you go. You can see the power of Solemn Scolding and why it's a card I prefer playing over something like TTH, especially in the ladder where you will run into a lot of those Harpies. I think this is the last replay I had saved, I want to say. Let's see what we have here. I think this is a little bit non-meta that you'll run into. Yes, so here we go. I ran into this deck as I was kind of testing the deck, and just to kind of show you guys the power of this deck. So what this guy wants... Or actually, no, this is an Evil Eye. So this is, this is actually a little of an awkward duel. Where we, where I pretty much just keep scolding him into submission for the most part. You can see here that he sets a card. That card is TTH, I believe. So we're going to keep going, keep going. Demon's Resonance, we're going to go in, return a Crimson, bring out that Wild Wind. Wild Wind it up. He does TTH me, at which point I set my other Resonator, my normal summon, and I activate Solemn Scolding. Solemn Scolding doesn't even let this card activate. So even though it gets destroyed, lets him add an Evil Eye monster, he can't do that. This card never activated. Boom, get out of here. You don't get to use that card. He continues setting up, does his thing, you know, swings to my Resonator, all is good. I top deck another red Resonator, Wandering King for the Crimson, yet again. Send it back, have the Wild Wind. I have full combo and Scolding again from 1,000 life points. Summon, Red Rising, you guys know the combo at this point. Go in, get a bunch of life points, summon the Darkened, go into the Archfiend Bane, set the Scolding again. Now I can't destroy this card, so my only out is pretty much Cosmic Cyclone, and I have another I have two Scoldings, so I can pretty much stop his plays consistently and just wait for Cosmic Cyclone, and it does take a while because I did have to scold and then wait to gain life points for the for lethal afterwards for Cosmic. If I had MST, I wouldn't have to, but it is what it is. I don't have MST. I don't want TGs. Blame me. So again, he goes for the field spell. I don't want him adding anything. Solemn Scolding yet again. Now we're just chilling. Go into the Wild Wind, make the Crimson the Red Rising Dragon after we draw a couple cards. Red Resonator gives me 3,500. There goes the Cosmic Cyclone, and he is out of here because he did not draw his out before I drew my out to the whole situation. You can see my life points going up and down, up and down, up and down. Alright, and I believe this one should be the last one. Kind of shows you how this deck can be outstanding without even having to be outstanding. So, I believe this is my only one not in KCGT. Oh, no, it was. This is all in KCGT. This guy was playing a Stromberg, Zexal Weapon type of scenario. I'm not really sure what that whole thing was about. But I don't even fight this guy, even though I could have, right? So I do my whole opening combo. You can see here, another common thing you can do is go ahead and add the Doom Caliber early. If you have both the Crimson and the Wild Wind already available to you in your opening hand, you can go ahead and add Doom Caliber. That way you can summon him to negate the first monster effect with no real worries. And then even if they don't use a monster effect, you can just use a tuner plus the Doom Caliber to go into a level 6, so then you can use your monster effects again, right? But we're not going to do any of that, because once I realized he was cheesing me, I just had a good old laugh. Because I bring him out, here's the combo, this is the ultimate opener this deck can make if you're playing the sample deck. You've got Doom Caliber Knight plus a Scolding, Monster Negate guaranteed, and the Scolding if you want to do anything else. So he goes for the Ditherium, which also has a mandatory effect, so he tries to normal summon that. I immediately pop that. We don't want to deal with any of that. Alright. So then he brings out Glyph to make the Stromberg. At this point, I'm like, okay, I can Scolding the Stromberg, but here's the thing. If this is a Stromberg cheese deck, Grand Module at 4k, Chaos Utopia, the one that reduces you to 0 and he gets over 4k and swings in, neither of those can kill me. I'm at 6,000 life points and I can keep gaining life points. If Stromberg is on the field, he's going to deck out. And that's exactly what happens for this guy. So he activates Stromberg Castle. I don't Scolding it because I want to just laugh at him, essentially. I let him, I'm just like, whatever, do whatever you want. Here I am at 6,100. Dark End Dragon, send the Glyph away. Wandering King, add that Crimson. I top decked a Wild Wind. Even if I didn't top deck Wild Wind, I can simply just go in and search it because I have the Crimson Resonator. And then we just endlessly loop life points at this point. I gain 21, pass it back. Are you gonna Utopia cheese me, man? I have 8,000 life! Are you gonna Grand Module? I don't care! I can put my monster in attack mode. I don't care! So we keep going. He doesn't do either of those things. He goes into Iron Hans. He ends up making his Utopia. Irrelevant. Irrelevant, you know what I mean? He's got 2 cards left in the deck. Red Resonator Call adds another Crimson. I can gain life points again, and I do just that. Red Rising Dragon, bring back the Red Resonator. I have so many life points now. And there you go. You can beat decks that are cheesy like that, Utopia decks, Stromberg decks, stuff like that, essentially without even doing anything. You just AFK and then they lose by deck out. So there you go. So really strong deck. I think it does have potential to be tier 1. It just kind of depends, especially in a no side format like KCGT. I think it's very powerful, especially if you're playing the counter trap variant. Counter traps have always just been huge. They just had really huge drawbacks. So if you're playing in a deck that literally does not have a drawback, you know, it is what it is. Yes, the skill breaks it immensely. So here's hoping they don't nerf the skill, because if they do, this deck simply does not function. It is another deck that would just die without the skill, because it's essentially turning a 2-card combo into a 1-card combo every single time with just normal summons. And then card advantage doesn't even matter if you're Wild Wind's just adding more card advantage to your hand and your deck. But yeah, that's pretty much going to do it for this guide. If you have questions, concerns, I think I covered a lot. But if there's anything that any other questions that you may have, feel free to put a comment down below. If we get enough comments, enough questions, I may do a follow-up video. Otherwise, I heavily recommend joining the Discord. The Discord has new player guide help. You can also, I occasionally can help as well. So if you have any questions, I'd be more than happy to assist you, especially if you have specific scenarios or anything like that you'd like to ask about. Other than that, if you'd like to see this deck perform in tournaments, definitely check out the Twitch side of things, where you can see more of me, you see more of Circus here on the channel. But I said, hey, let me do an RDA video because I really want to make one. And yeah, that's pretty much it. I hope you guys have a fantastic day. I hope you end up enjoying this deck, and feel free to comment below. Peace out, YouTube.